This is Theory TV. I'm your host, MC. Today we're talking about an essay called 24, Challenging Stereotypes by Evelyn Al-Sultani. It's a really good essay for a number of reasons that I want to talk about now. First of all, let's summarize her argument. As the abstract says, critical discussions about television's patterns of representation sometimes devolve into reductive assessments of positive or negative, good or bad images. In this essay, Evelyn Al-Sultani describes how the action drama 24 employed innovative strategies to avoid stereotypes of Arab Muslim terrorists, but argues that sympathetic portrayals of individuals won't alleviate television's consistent representation of Arabs and Muslims, primarily within the context of terrorism. So that's the author's argument. One of the things that I think is great about this essay is that it deals with a problem that people outside of television criticism are concerned about. In the essay, Al-Sultani talks about CAIR, the Council for American Islamic Relations, which monitors all kinds of hatred towards Islamic and Arab peoples in North America. One of the things they've written about is stereotyping in the media. So in a sense, they problematize the issue. They bring the problem of stereotyping into the essay. It's not just the critic who's doing it. And I think that's great. Another thing that's really good about this essay is it doesn't simply state the obvious, that there are shows out there which deal in stereotypes of Arab peoples or stereotypes of other people. Actually, what this essay does is it presents the attempts by the writers on 24 to work against stereotypes. So that's already more interesting than just giving me a list of the stereotypes that are out there and saying, here, look, this is all bad. In fact, it's quite sympathetic to the writers and to their problem of representing these people, but without using stereotypes. So let's look at those issues in a little bit more detail. First of all, in her essay, Al-Sultani lists some of the representational strategies used by the writers on 24 to work against stereotypes. So those would include portraying Arab and Muslim Americans as patriotic Americans, portraying Arab and Muslim Americans as innocent victims of post-9/11 hate crimes, also humanizing Arab or Muslim characters by, for instance, showing them with their families or engaged in other everyday activities that audiences can understand and connect to. And finally, the strategy of flipping the terrorist, which is making the identity of the terrorist turn out not to be an Arab or Muslim, but someone from another country or another ethnicity or another religion. Very tricky, huh? So these are strategies used by 24 so that they don't simply traffic in stereotypes, but actually try to work against the stereotypes. And that's very interesting. Not every show tries to do that. That makes this a more interesting essay. One of the things, as I mentioned, that I like about this essay is that the problem of stereotyping is actually presented to us through the lens of common sense, everyday understandings of stereotypes. So this is not a problem that's simply confined to TV critics. The public actually problematizes representation and stereotypes. They recognize that there's something wrong with reducing a whole group of people to a simple set of negative traits. And that's probably a fair, quick definition of stereotyping. Basically, a whole group of different individuals are reduced to a few categories, and those categories are split up between those that are assumed to be positive, those that are assumed to be negative, and stereotypes usually dwell on the negative. So one of the harmful or hurtful aspects of stereotyping is the reduction of the diversity of individual attitudes and feelings and identities down to one core category. If you're Muslim America, you are this. If you're Muslim American, you are, such and such. Whereas individuals are vastly different. So it's not a great thing to reduce that. Now, some might argue, as Richard Dwyer did in his essay, that drama and television couldn't get by without using types. There's no time in a 50-minute drama to expose the entire backstory of a disposable villain who will be gone this week once he's conquered or something like that. Even in long-term serial television, you don't have the time to dwell on the specific characteristics of every character. So types are absolutely necessary. And yet what the essay does so well is to point out that the issue is not really resolved by supplying more positive representations of the stereotype group. I mean, that seems to be what most public actors want from representation. You know, those are bad images of particular characters or people. We should show good images of people. Another interesting thing to point out in the context of our theoretical work on representation is the sheer binarism inherent in thinking about good or bad representations or positive or negative images of Arab people. Who gets to say what is a good or a bad image? I mean, is it up to the stereotyped group who is going to have a particular subject position on these representations, of course? Or is it up to the, quote unquote mainstream that is the more dominant subject position from which the stereotype group is typically portrayed? I mean, who gets to say what's a positive or a negative image? And how then, even if you do have, even if you can agree on a positive image, what about the reductiveness of saying, for instance, that a Muslim character who's a patriot who will go out and fight against terrorists is that really a positive image in everybody's mind? I mean, doesn't that link up in a kind of a chain of associations with obedience to authority, with nationalist visions of superiority, and so many other aspects that individuals watching the shows may want to reject? So these stereotypes seem to offer very constrained subject positions, even if they're positive or negative images that are portrayed.